What's going on? It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indies Sports Ticket. And you know what today's show is going to be all about. We're talking game one, Pacers Celtics. People are rightfully upset after the Pacers gave away that game late. I'm having Tony East of Locked On Pacers on to join me at 11:20, as he always does on Wednesdays. Cannot wait to talk to him about that game because it was a really good game. Was it frustrating? Should the Pacers have won? The answer to both of those questions are yes. Okay, I mean it was a great basketball game though, and I I, I really enjoyed it. I did. I haven't had that much fun watching a basketball game in a while. Right, like these are two really good offensive teams, and that was on full display last night, despite the tough loss. Like this is clearly a game that the Pacers should have won, but they didn't. Okay, the Pacers were in a great spot to win this game. Two bad turnovers in the final 30 seconds of the fourth quarter ultimately costed them the game. One from Halliburton at midcourt that did not result in a Celtics bucket, but Pacers still could have scored there, extended the lead, to 5 or 6 in that spot. And then like the game's probably over at that point. And then, but he turns it over, he just dribbles it off his foot. From there, everything just kind of spiraled out of control, right? From there, you get a great stop by Miles Turner and this defense. Halliburton grabs the rebound. They foul him. They then have to inbound the ball, and Nembhard turned it over, right? Like that's just what happened. It was just not a good look to end the game, and that Nembhard turnover led to Jaylen Brown hitting a really tough three in the corner. Like it's as simple as the Pacers fell apart late in the game, and the Boston Celtics didn't. And a large part of why I picked the Celtics to win this series in 7 games is because of experience. Like when we look through the history of the NBA, this is something I'm going to continue to harp on for both this series, Boston against Indiana, and also for the other series, Dallas against Minnesota. Having been there before matters. Okay, because like with every series that you advance, like the pressure mounts, and it's really hard to go from not making the playoffs to all of a sudden winning the conference finals. Like that's a really hard thing to do. And I think that we saw why in last night's game. Like there just wasn't very much experience on this Pacer side. They fell apart. They came out tight. They finished the game tight. I mean, outside of Siakam, none of these guys had played in the playoffs before, really, right? And none of these guys outside of Siakam had played in the Eastern Conference Finals, right? And then when you look across the sideline, the Boston Celtics have dudes that have played in the NBA Finals before. Yeah, and I thought the experience showed itself late in that game last night. The Pacers looked jittery, and it led to turnovers while the Celtics stayed calm, and they came back to win. Right now, as annoying and frustrating as that loss was last night, there are positives in this game. Okay, the Pacers lost a tough game one to the Knicks, and it didn't matter. Can we please remember that? In a lot of ways, I would argue that game one loss to the Knicks is tougher to swallow than this game one loss to Boston, right? Because the Knicks game, it was completely taken out of the hands of the Pacers. Like there was nothing that they could have done. The referee decided to insert himself into the game, and it cost them. Here, the Pacers can very easily go back to the hotel room and say, hey, we played really well. We should have won, but we did something that we never do, and that's turn the basketball over. So I think that they're going to respond well in game 2, just like they did in their last series against the Knicks. I am not worried about the Pacers. This team has been resilient all year. They're going to let this roll off their back. If you listen to any of the post-game stuff, which I've definitely got clips from, like you're going to notice that they sound fine. Like Halliburton doesn't sound like defeated. He's very much like, let's get to game 2. I'm ready for Thursday. Rick Carlisle, the exact same thing. Okay. And look, with that being said, I didn't think the Pacers obviously played well, but they didn't play perfect. Like there's definitely areas and things that they can clean up. Like they're going to be fine. I felt like Boston played a pretty good game. They missed some shots that they usually make, but for the most part, I didn't think that Boston really had much room to improve. Like Boston played a pretty normal Boston game. Like the output that they put out on the floor is what we're going to continue to see. Meanwhile, we're not going to continue to see 22 turnovers from your Indiana Pacers because they just don't do that. Okay. When it comes to Boston, I thought that offensively they were good, which I think is a positive for the Pacers. It wasn't like Boston played bad and still won, right? Like Boston loses games when they take bad threes, and they have a tendency to do that. They didn't do that last night. A lot of the threes that they took were open. Jason Tatum scored the ball. I know that he struggled a little bit in the fourth quarter, but he scored 11 points in overtime. So give him all the credit that he deserves. Jaylen Brown, he scored the ball. He was good. Drew Holiday had an outlier performance. He almost had a triple-double. He had 28 points, 8 assists, and 7 rebounds. Like, he was awesome. He's not going to continue to do that throughout this series. Okay, like, he's going to continue to be impactful, but not at that level. Okay, like, Drew Holiday's not about to average, 25 points a game in this series. That's not going to happen. Something else that isn't going to continue to happen in this series is the Pacers allowing Boston to start the game on a 12-0 run. Okay, like, the Pacers couldn't have started the game any worse. I thought that they looked a little jittery. I think that's why, Horford had the block. They had a couple turnovers. They missed some shots that they usually make. Like, if the Pacers had gotten off to a normal start, they would have been in a much better position throughout the first half. Therefore, they probably would have been in a better position late in the game to potentially win the game. Going, 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes to start the game and not score, like, you just can't do that. Like, at that point, like, you're really handcuffing yourself. It's like, okay, we're going to play offense for 45 minutes. We're going to let you guys play offense for 48 minutes. It's hard to win when you're doing that. They didn't get off to a great start in the third quarter either. Here is Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle talking about the start to the game and the start to the second half.
Well, I mean, we got down 12-0. Took a big punch early in the game. Withstood that, fought back, got it even at halftime. That was a positive. We didn't start the third quarter well, but we ended it well. And so I think we'll look at the third quarter, the first parts, the first half of the third quarter. And I know there are things we can do better at both ends. And we got to make those corrections and come back Thursday.
That was Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle on the start to the game and the start to the third quarter. Neither one was very good. If they start those quarters better, they have a much better chance to win the game in the end. The Pacers showed the resiliency and the willingness to come back and make it a game, right? But it would have been nice if the Pacers had produced in any sort of way to start the game. I think that's part of what cost the Pacers the game that no one else is really going to focus on. They looked tight to start the game. As the game went on, they loosened up, while the Celtics looked calm the whole way. Okay, it was obvious that the Celtics had been there before and the Pacers hadn't. And that won't be the case in game 2. I think the Pacers are going to get a lot of the jitters out, all those different types of things. And if the Pacers start game 2 on Thursday and don't score in the first 2.5 minutes like they did in game 1, I'll be absolutely shocked. That's not going to happen again in this series. The Pacers are too good offensively, and I do think that after last night, they've really kind of settled into the series. And here's the thing. I think here's the really positive thing. Once the Pacers calmed down and settled in, they were really good. They were the normal Pacers team that we've seen throughout this playoffs. They pushed the pace, they got into the lane, and when they kicked it out to shooters, they made most of them. They shot, 37% from 3, which, that's a good percentage, but they can shoot it better than that, right? Like, the Celtics are a tremendous defensive team. I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the Pacers are a tremendous offensive team, and great offense beats great defense every single time. It just does. Okay, the Pacers are going to have no issue scoring the basketball in this series. Okay, like they generated open looks at the same rate that they did against the Knicks. Okay, the Celtics are a good defensive team, but they are at their best defending one-on-one, defending guys, trying to break down the defense through handling the basketball. And that's not what the Pacers do. Like, the Pacers are very team-oriented, right? They play this team-oriented brand of basketball on the offensive end, and it worked well against this Celtics team. They got into the paint. They scored 56 points in the paint, which is incredible. They shot 37% from 3. Like, that's who this Pacers team is on offense. They are going to score, right? They got everything that they wanted on the offensive side of the floor. I don't know what the Celtics can do to keep them from getting those looks. I really don't. Okay, the Pacers spread the floor well. They used ball screens well to get into the lane. I said yesterday that there's a decent chance that the Celtics were going to switch a lot of the screening action. They did. When they did that, they were able to attack Al Horford, right, which was a big deal, especially later in the game in the fourth quarter. There's a lot of times where they would get Al Horford matched up on either, Siakam or Halliburton, and they just let them go to work and they scored late. Like I thought that they did a good job of matchup hunting and taking advantage of the switching defense that the Pacers played, right? And when they weren't going one-on-one against Al Horford, Pacers did a good job of moving the basketball. Okay, like there were several possessions where the Celtics were scrambling and chasing the ball around the perimeter. And if that didn't happen, then the Pacers got a good shot right at the rim, right? Like the offense for the Pacers last night, it was good, it was productive. That's going to continue to happen. The issue for the Pacers was something that they usually don't do. The Pacers turn the basketball over way too much. Okay, the Pacers have done a really good job throughout these playoffs, for the most part, of not turning the basketball over. Okay, like they turned the ball over too much in Game 5 against the Knicks. They had 18 turnovers in that game, and they lost by 30. Okay, last night, they turned the basketball over 22 times, 2 times in the final 30 seconds of the fourth quarter. That probably cost them the game. And the game went to overtime, and they still had a chance to win it. Okay, like this Pacers team is going to be fine. Let's look at those turnovers, though, because that is definitely the story of this game from the Pacers' perspective of things. The Halliburton turnover, I think, was really the more problematic one. Okay, like the Halliburton turnover where he dribbled it off his foot with 27 seconds left, that really took away an opportunity for the Pacers to extend their lead. Okay, because if they come down there and they score, they're up by 5 or 6, and now it's a 2-possession game with 15 seconds left, and it's probably over. But instead, he dribbles it off his foot, ball goes out of bounds, and it's a major issue, right? And here is Tyrese Halliburton talking about that play. Earlier in the press conference, what you're going to hear Halliburton address here is Carlisle took the blame for the loss, as a good coach does, saying that he didn't call a timeout there on the inbounds and advance the ball. That's fine. I think that the big turnover here was the Halliburton turnover with 27 seconds left. Here is Tyrese Halliburton talking about that play.
That's not on him. That's not on him. Us as players, we got to do a better job. I had 2 bad turnovers that I feel like cost us the game, one in fourth and one in overtime. So, I understand he's protecting us, protecting, me as well. But I'll take that more than he should. I got to be better, and I will be better in game 2, and we'll respond the right way.
Yeah, and I believe everything that he just said. I think that Halliburton's going to be better in game 2, and I think that they're going to respond in the right way. This is a very resilient Pacers team. Like, they are going to respond. They're going to come back, and they are going to play well. Okay, and because here's the thing, like even after the Halliburton turnover, they responded well. They got a great stop, right? Like Miles Turner was great. He protected the rim. He grabbed the rebound. It was a great stop. I was like, oh, game over, right? And then Halliburton comes away with the ball. They foul him. Nembhard can't get it in. He forces a bad pass to Pascal Siakam instead of taking a timeout. Here's Rick Carlisle talking about how he should have taken a timeout in that spot with about 8.5 seconds left. Here is Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle on why he should have taken a timeout there.
Well, I love the way our guys fought in this game. This loss is totally on me. With 10 seconds in regulation, we should have just taken the timeout, advanced the ball, and found a way to get it in and made a free throw or 2 and ended the game. But it didn't happen, and we made some other mistakes. But our guys just need to concentrate on fighting the way they fought in this game from start to finish, and we'll be back Thursday.
That was Pacers head coach Rick Carlisle talking about how he should have called a timeout on that inbounds pass. Okay, like this, in hindsight, is going to be labeled as the biggest play of the game. I still think it was Halliburton dribbling that ball off his foot when they had a chance to go up by 5 or 6 with 27 seconds left. Whatever, the failed inbound pass set up the game winner that Jaylen Brown hit, and everybody's going to say the Pacers should have fouled. That's what everybody's going to say. Siakam couldn't have fouled. He should not have fouled in that situation. Okay, the way that Jaylen Brown caught the ball, it looked like he was going to move straight into a shot. If Siakam had fouled him, Brown would have gotten either 3 free throws or he would have hit a great shot and gotten a 4-point play. Siakam did the right thing in not fouling Jaylen Brown when he caught the ball in the corner. He played good defense. Jaylen Brown just showed why he makes $60 million a year. He had a really tough shot, and sometimes you just have to tip your cap. I thought Siakam did the right thing in not fouling Jaylen Brown in that scenario. And here's the truth of it. the Pacers don't turn the basketball over 22 times, Siakam wouldn't have been in that situation in the first place. Like when we look back at this game, like that is what's going to stick out, right? Like obviously those two late turnovers are going to stick out. The Halliburton turnover in overtime is going to stick out, but 22 turnovers, you can't do that and expect to beat a team as good as the Boston Celtics. Because here's the thing, I thought that the Pacers actually played good defense. I thought they defended well. I thought that they made things difficult on Boston for the most part. Okay, like I thought that they did a lot of things well, right? And like that's my kind of takeaway from this game. Like I know that they gave up 133 points, but I thought that they defended well for the most part because like they're going to give up points because they just don't have the personnel to play great defense. But they competed. Halliburton was better than I thought he'd be on the defensive end. The Celtics hunted him for certain spots during the game, but he held his own. The Celtics pulled Miles Turner away from the rim, which made things a little bit tougher on the Pacers defense. But I still thought that the rim protection was solid whenever Miles Turner had chances to defend the rim. You know, one thing that this Pacers team has really struggled with is rebounding. The rebounds were even. The Pacers had 44 rebounds to Boston's 43. Like if the Pacers can defend the way that they did and they can rebound the way that they did, they're going to have a chance to win this series. For all the Miles Turner haters out there, he was awesome last night. Double-double, 17 points in the first half. He pulled down 10 rebounds as well. Like the areas where the Pacers normally struggle, they were good in. And it looks like they're going to be able to compete in those areas throughout this series. I thought the effort and the energy from the Pacers was up. I think that's going to continue. Like this is a young, resilient bunch who's going to respond well in game 2. I know Tony East has a lot of thoughts on this. I think he's going to agree with me. I think he knows that this team's going to respond well in game 2. I'm going to get his thoughts on should Carlisle have called a timeout? What about that Halliburton turnover with 27 seconds left? I'm talking to Tony East about all that when we come back here in about 4 minutes. The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indies Sports Ticket, joined by Tony East, as I am every Wednesday at this time, as we continue to talk about a disappointing loss last night for the Pacers. I think that they're going to be fine going forward. Tony, how was the game last night? I know that you're in Boston, so how was it, and how are you feeling after a tough loss last night?
Wild. It'll be pretty memorable for me. A lot had to go wrong for it to go that way, but the home crowd certainly loved how it ended. That's for sure.
That makes sense. It was just rough. Like I've walked away from the game feeling pretty good about the Pacers going forward, just because they don't turn the basketball over the way that they did in game one. Like that isn't what happens. I'm pretty optimistic about the Pacers going forward. How do you feel about the rest of the series?
Yeah, I agree with you on that specifically. Like they had I think it was 18 turnover game against the Knicks last round, and they beat themselves up for that. And they said, yeah, it's not going to happen again. And it didn't that round. They had 8 the next game, and then 12 in their epic game 7 where they didn't miss a shot. And in the postseason, that was at the time their only game with more than 14 turnovers, right? The whole playoff. Like they've done well to take care of the ball. And then last night happened, and they just threw it. I mean, dribbled it off their feet, threw it all over the gym, couldn't get it in bounds. Like it was horrible. So I think you're right there. And they mentioned after the game, I think every player said something to the effect of like, yeah, we're not going to turn it over that much again. So on that hand, I get it. Like they're not going to beat them. I don't think they'll beat themselves again in this series. That said, Boston shot 33% from 3. That's the worst a Pacers opponent has shot from 3 in the last 4 playoff games. They missed some free throws. They also had 14 turnovers and 15 fouls. Like they did get a pretty. The Celtics didn't play bad, but they did get a pretty Boston performance, and to not be able to capitalize on that because of their own mistakes and not because of just missing shots or something like that, I think that's pretty brutal. So even if they clean up turnovers and the fouls, I still think they'll have, to take some steps forward, especially defensively, to overcome that. But I agree that in general, like 9 or 10 possessions they gave away could go a long way. And they played well. Like when they actually got a shot up, they looked pretty good. They just got to get more of them up.
Yeah, except for the first, 2.5 minutes where Boston started the game on a 12-0 run. Like that's like there were just like all these little weird spurts and things that happened during the game for Indiana. Whereas like for Boston, like yes, like they missed some open shots that they usually make, but for the most part, like I feel like what we saw from Boston in game 1 is what we're gonna continue to see. This series is so interesting because it's like I want to judge these defenses, but at the same time, it's like these are the 2 best offenses in the league. Like the offensive talent on the floor at all times is really, really high. And so like keeping that in mind, like I was like, they gave up 133 points in overtime. Like I didn't think that they defended poorly. I thought Boston really targeted Halliburton early and throughout the game. I thought he held up pretty well defensively. What did you think of Halliburton's performance? Start on the defensive side of the ball because he's going to have to defend well for the Pacers to win this series, and then kind of move into the offensive side of things.
Yeah, definitely targeted early, and I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know if they would necessarily went away from him necessarily. The Pacers just found ways to be better about it. But doing some quick math, I believe the Celtics took 16 shots with Halliburton as the primary defender last night, which is a ton for one player in one game. They made 9 of those, which is very good. And the reason that's noteworthy is he ended up on a lot of guys, right? He ended up with very similar time of possession defended on Drew Holiday and Derek White. And I think that's primarily because Pacers were switching. And the Celtics did a good job to keep going at him. But he also has spent a good amount of time on both Tatum and Brown, which again goes back to that switching that I noticed early. And the Celtics were going at him, putting him in actions early, especially like you said, making him involved. And I guess he did all right. The reason they're picking on him is because they think he's a weak point. They're able to get good looks over him, and they did a good job with that. So I don't know how the Pacers either hide him. They can't. The Celtics have too much talent to do that. But how can they make that more effective or more feasible for 48 minutes will be something they'll have to figure out because there's nowhere else to put him. Like I think Drew Holiday is literally the only option unless the Celtics suffer another injury in some way. I mean, I guess you could gamble that he goes on Al Horford, but that's too risky.
Yeah,
he did play well. Yeah, and then you have to figure out who Turner's guarding. So, he did play a good offensive game, right? Raining in the threes. He made some twos. His passing was great again. His first double-digit assist game in a while. Like, he obviously played very well. He was spectacular in the first half in particular to kind of get the Pacers back into it, set the tone, prove that he, has a huge role in this series. It's just it was tough with his defense too. They lost his minutes by 11 points, right? Like they couldn't quite keep up because of that. So I think he needs to be a little more effective on defense, and the Pacers need to at least find ways to have those minutes go better because he did show that even against a very good Celtics defense, he and the team can have success in the offensive end.
Yeah, that was my biggest takeaway from the game. Once again, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Like the Pacers were fine scoring the basketball, which I kind of figured that they would be. Like when I look at Boston's personnel, they're a great on-ball defensive team. Like teams that try to break you down off the dribble, the Celtics are going to defend better against. Whereas the Pacers are like, that's fine. We're going to take one or two dribbles and we're going to move the basketball. And so, which is just a much tougher style to defend in general. So I thought offensively they were fine. I thought Halliburton settled for some threes, especially in the second half. Like he hit several in the first half. Like what'd you kind of think? Like especially in the third quarter. Like I track Halliburton's paint touches throughout the game because I think he's just better, and the Pacers' offense is better when he gets into the lane. And for me, like there was a big drop off from the first half to the second half in his paint touches. Did you notice that at all?
Yeah, that's what he says a lot is like we always talk about his shot attempts, and he always says, no, it's not about that. Like when I'm playing aggressive, to use his own words, or, playing the way I think is right, it's because I'm getting into the paint, getting paint touches with 2 feet, and then I can either score, spray from there, whatever. And early in the game, he like really early, like the first 3-4 minutes, he wasn't doing that very well. And then he started to do it and was like getting the mid-rangers to go. And that kind of changed the Pacers' fortunes and got their offense rolling before everyone else got involved. And then the second half, some of this is the Celtics and some of it's him. Like that didn't happen as much to me. I can look really quickly while I'm talking, but I think, he had more than half of his 2-point attempts came in the first half of this game, and he took just a bunch of 6 threes until he got his shots up in the second half. And his passing was good. Their offense was still effective. Like Siakam was awesome, but he didn't play, at least to me, exactly the same way. And I don't know if it's that he saw something different and felt like he needed to be more looking into the threes, but it wasn't the same player. And the one time he needed to not get 2 feet in the paint, which was at the very last possession of regulation, he tried to and he couldn't do it. So it wasn't as effective. And I thought his first half was great and the second half wasn't. I agree with you. And that's what he says is get 2 feet in the paint. He didn't do it as much.
Once again, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Yeah, I don't know. He's such a good 3-point shooter. It's hard to tell him to not take those shots. But at the same time, like, I don't know. To me, Indy feels really similar to Denver in terms of like Denver's at their best when Jokic scores like 24 points and has like 12 assists. And the Pacers are better when Halliburton scores like 24 points and has 12 assists as opposed to him scoring like 35. I like it when he gets downhill more. I want to talk about something that I think people are going to make a big deal out of after this game that I just don't think was. The Celtics took 20 more free throws than the Pacers did last night. I didn't feel like the officiating was that bad. I thought a lot of the, like, if you go back and you break down the shots, 28% of the Celtics shots came at the rim, 27% of the Pacers shots came at the rim, but a lot of those shots for the Pacers were like in transition. I thought in the half court, they took more jump shots. I didn't think that the officiating was that bad. What did you think?
Yeah, it was strange, like looking at the free throw numbers specifically. 30 to 10 is the number that everybody's going to point at because the foul discrepancy wasn't as wide. It was 23 to 15, which says two things to me. One, that the Pacers committed a lot more shooting fouls, which is true watching the game.
Yeah.
And two, that they were just in the bonus more, the Celtics were, because there are more fouls. So that's going to lead to the free throw discrepancy. I like the Knicks game one. Obviously, everybody noticed how awful that was, right? Like that became the story from that game. Like I never felt in this game like, oh, they're getting hosed or like they're missing calls. Like that was so brutal. There are a couple of things here and there, but that happens every game, right? So I'm like you. I didn't walk away from this game going, oh, this is such a big story. Even though like they felt like there were times their jerseys were held or there were like the Tatum free throw late in the game. I think they believe it was clearly on the floor instead of a shooting foul. I get those quibbles from them specifically, but I, like you, throughout the flow of the game was like, yeah, this feels fine to me, and it just ended up with the numbers it did. I think the second half free throw discrepancy was 15-1, which is something the Pacers probably don't feel very good about. That's huge, and the Celtics made 24 of those. So I'm sure it'll be a story going forward, but certainly not, not something I noticed compared to other games where officiating has been, let's say, a topic in the playoffs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I think one of the more interesting things about game one, like they call game one like the feel out game, and I think both teams are walking away feeling like they've identified some advantages. Like for the Pacers, like I think they're going to attack Al Horford a lot more. That's kind of what they did in the fourth quarter, and they had a lot of success. The Celtics are obviously going to continue to attack Halliburton. All in all, though, like I think the Pacers have a really good chance of winning game two. What do you kind of think their chances are going forward in terms of winning the series?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, right? Pacers haven't won a game one yet in the playoffs, so this is certainly not doom and gloom for them. Although obviously it hurts when they had such a good chance to win, similar to game one against New York. The thing is, game one of the entire playoffs against the Bucks, if you want to call these all feel out games, like they were awful. That was probably their second worst performance of the entire playoffs so far that night, and the whole story about how can they play better, what can Halliburton do better, and then they won game two. And then in the second round, the first game happened, and they were tied in the last minute and feel like they got hosed. But all the discussion was about Halliburton being better and all this stuff he's got to do to get, be aggressive. And after this one, they lost, obviously, but no discussion about a particular player doing something so wrong or anything like that. Like, they played a way that makes sense and, like, can lead to wins. Like, it was by far, to me, their best in total game one performance. They had 38 assists, right? They moved the ball really well. They had moments of good defense, like they erased 2 12-0 deficits like that. Their bench was good at times. Every star player had a long stretch of success in this game for the Pacers. Like, a lot of stuff is like, yeah, we can do that again. Nothing was so fluky with their shooting percentages anyway. So, like we said at the top, if they just clean up the turnovers, they probably feel really good about it. Like, it was their best, air quotes, feel out game of the playoffs so far, and they had a shot. They couldn't take advantage, and that's on them, and they all admitted it. Everybody tried to take the blame for the final minute in OT, which is respectable, but there were a lot of things that went wrong for it to end that way. But to your point, I think that if you're going to call game one that, and I think there is something to that, especially for a Pacers team that's good at adjusting, this was their best start to a series of the postseason to me in terms of just total team performance. No obvious, like, this was so bad, what were they thinking going into the game kind of stuff.
Yeah, once again, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. Let's talk about that final minute, because that's what people are really talking about. Let's work backwards. So one of the things that I hate on just Twitter or anything in general is when people play the result, especially when teams do or don't foul up 3 late. Like, if Jaylen Brown had missed the shot last night, we would have gotten a whole bunch of tweets on that's why you do not foul up 3 late. But since he made it, everyone's like, that's why you foul up 3 late. I thought Siakam made the right play. Legler for ESPN, he covers basketball better than anyone not named Tony East or Jonathan Smith. And I thought what he said was really interesting. Like, when you teach guys to foul up 3 late, you teach them to do it when they're dribbling because, like, their hand is moving down. Jaylen Brown never took a dribble. He caught the ball, and it looked like he was going to shoot it immediately. I thought Siakam did the right thing by not fouling there. What did you think of that crazy shot?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's so hard because if you just look at the results of the play, the moment is everyone says, "Oh, I should have fouled during the pump fake." Like, he doesn't know he's pump faking. That's the whole point, right? Like, like Lego said, like, he's not dribbling, and you don't want to do it. And let's pretend he does foul him at that pump fake moment, and then he does shoot it, and then it's a 3-shot foul. And, like, the chances Jaylen Brown makes 3 free throws in a row, given his career percentage, is probably higher than the chance he makes the 3 he actually made. It's pretty close. Yeah, I ran the math last night. So, like, then if that happens, everyone's saying, "Oh, why did he foul? What was he thinking? That's so stupid. What a low IQ player." You're like, it's just all based on the result of the play. And Jaylen Brown made a ridiculous shot. So, like, yeah, he had a split second where he pump faked and he could have fouled. He didn't know he was pump faking. Like, I'm not putting that on him. I'm putting that on Jaylen Brown for making a hell of a play. So I'm with you and Legler and everybody who said that in the last, whatever. I can't even do math, 12, 13 hours since the game ended. The real sin of that play to me is they didn't switch, right? They were trying to have Siakam chase Brown around that screen, and he actually got over it pretty well, and then Derek White did a little, I don't even know what to call it, shimmy backwards to get in the way, and Siakam couldn't get over it anymore. And so if they switched, TJ McConnell just chases Jaylen Brown over the corner. He's probably on him faster, but then it's a much more open shot for Brown if he doesn't get there faster because of the height difference between Siakam and McConnell. So I get why they didn't want to do that, but obviously, and I'm obviously talking results based too, but had they switched, I think they would have had an actual chance to foul right on the catch versus what actually happened. So that's where I think that went wrong, but I'm not going to blame Siakam or the approach to that play. I think what they did all makes sense.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. I thought that they were going to switch, but obviously they didn't. And that was, like, in my opinion, like, Jaylen Brown just showed why they're paying him, $60 million a year. That's really all that happened, because that shot, he's like behind the backboard, fading away. Siakam's right up on him. He just hit a great shot, and that's just what happens sometimes. I want to move to the inbound play. I was sitting at home. I was like, please call a timeout, because it just didn't look good from the jump. What was your reaction sitting in the stadium? Were you asking for them to call a timeout? Like, kind of walk me through your opinion on that play.
Yeah, I don't know the rules apparently, because I didn't know they could advance it after that foul, which they could have. It's funny when you watch it from the broadcast overhead view. Like, if Nembhard just throws it a little more towards the baseline, I think they get it in. Like, that's kind of what made it tricky, is it got close enough to Siakam that Brown could get his hand on it, and that's what made it all bobbled and go out of bounds. So, yes, a timeout if they could have advanced it and had more space to throw the pass, or just less space for the Celtics to, get it out of bounds and immediately run that play. Yeah, of course, that's better. But I didn't know that, so I can't critique it myself in the moment. I think the pass was just not quite good enough, and among many turnovers late, that one was killing. They so many things had to go wrong, and that play was just another one. It was just brutal.
It was. Last question for you. Once again, joined by Tony East of Locked On Pacers. I thought that the biggest play of the game, or the biggest miscue late, was the Halliburton turnover with 27 seconds left. It was like they have a chance to go in and score and go up by 2 possessions there, and they didn't. I thought that was the play. I feel like, people are going to talk about the inbound and the 3, I think, more than anything else. But for me, like, that was the play that kind of set up the rest of the dominoes to fall in favor of Boston. Like, I wasn't there. It looked like he just dribbled it off his foot. What was your reaction to that play? Because I couldn't believe it. I was like, Halliburton never does that.
Yeah, he's doing the Halliburton thing, looking up the floor, seeing Siakam and Turner running with only one defender, and he's looking at Jrue Holiday who's defending him, and he puts it down, and then it hits his right knee, like, as he's trying to grab the ball with his left hand. And it was just so peculiar, like a very odd moment of, a guy who's a great player just having a hand-eye coordination flub. And Nesmith, to his credit, dives on the floor to get it, but it's just too close to that out of bounds line to save it. So that the worst case scenario there for the Pacers is they run a whole play, it goes terrible, and they miss, and then they're up 3 with 8 seconds left, and the Celtics have the ball 90 feet or something from their basket. Like, that's a much easier situation to foul than what they actually got. So it's just comical as we go through it backwards, just like how many things had to go wrong unenforced for the Pacers to lose this game, but it happened. And I don't know what happened with Albert and that coordination there, but he lost the ball at a pivotal time.
Yeah, it's just tough to swallow. But this team's resilient. They've responded really well throughout the playoffs as a whole. They're going to be fine. That's kind of how I feel about it.
I think they probably feel the same way. They didn't do anything fluky, and they were right in it. The Celtics weren't pulled from the field necessarily. I mean, they weren't hot either, and they were in it. But they've got to play better. They've got to not beat themselves.
They do. I think they got a really good chance tomorrow night. Who do you think wins tonight between Minnesota and Dallas?
I'm taking the home team in game 1. I'll take Minnesota, but that's going to be a great series.
Yeah, I like Dallas in 6.
Ooh. I'll take the Wolves in 7, maybe just because I want that to happen.
Fair enough. I just when we look through the course of NBA history, guys that have been there before in the conference finals and NBA finals just kind of seem to win. And Luka and a lot of these guys they've been there before. Minnesota hadn't made it out of the first round until this year, if I remember correctly. So I just think that experience wins. I think that's part of why the Pacers got off to such a slow start last night. Like, I thought it was obvious that Boston had played in the Eastern Conference Finals before in those first 2.5 minutes, and the Pacers hadn't.
Yeah, what was it, 12-0 in under 3 minutes,
Yeah.
I think, to start the game. Like, they had two 12-0 runs. I think they won in the third quarter, too. Like, I don't even know what to call that. Experience is probably a good thing to say. Yeah, it's 12-0 in 2 minutes and 43 seconds. And I don't know if in game one of the first round, the Pacers clearly were jittery and messing up. Like they did late in this game, obviously, but like they just missed, right? They missed 6 shots in that stretch. Like they just couldn't score, and they clearly erased it very quickly. They were tied in the first quarter, but like they cut out that stretch. They cut out the one in the third quarter. They win. Like there's just so many things that they win if they don't have happen, but they all happen.
Yeah, they did. And that's just the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes. And you got to move on. Tony, thanks for your time, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That is Tony East of Locked On Pacers. He writes for a whole bunch of outlets as well. You can find his writing and his podcast and stuff at Tony R. East on Twitter. When we come back here in a few minutes, I'm going to continue to highlight a lot of things that the Pacers did well because, like, they're going to be fine. Like, this series is still going to go 6 or 7 games because the Pacers are that good. Like, they 1,000% belong in this series. Like, they are that good of a basketball team. I'm going to explain all that when we come back here in about 4 minutes. Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indies Sports Ticket. Thank you for listening. No matter how you're listening, maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Maybe you're watching on the YouTube or Twitter live streams. Appreciate you for doing that as well. We're still talking Pacers and Celtics because that game last night was a lot of fun. I thought the Pacers looked good. I thought they should have won the game like many other people do. But even though they lost, there are still plenty of positive things to take away from it that speak to the fact that the Pacers are going to compete through the rest of this series. This looks like a 6 or 7 game series where the Pacers are going to pick a couple of games off of these really tough Boston Celtics. I thought Halliburton played well last night. He came out aggressive. I think that's really what we wanted to see, right? Because game 1 against the Bucks, he was not aggressive. Game 1 against the Knicks, he was not aggressive. Like, you felt Halliburton's presence on the court the entire game, which has been an issue throughout these playoffs. And that has to continue. That aggression continues, and the Pacers are going to have a great opportunity to win these games, right? Because they need him to play well in order for them to win. I wish he would have attacked the rim a little bit more. 14 of his 18 shots came from behind the three-point line, which, you know, he's a career 40% three-point shooter. So I have issues telling him not to take those shots. But at the same time, like, he finishes well and he shoots well from the mid-range too. So I wish he would have explored those areas a little bit more on the offensive side of the ball. Siakam played well. He got off to a slow start, but second half, he really did everything. He finished the game with 12 rebounds. He had 7 assists as well. Fourth quarter, he absolutely torched Al Horford. Like, you could very much tell that the Pacers were trying to get him matched up on Al Horford because Horford stood absolutely no chance. That man's 37 years old and just doesn't have the foot speed to defend Siakam. So the Celtics then tried to put Tatum or Jaylen Brown or someone a little bit quicker on Siakam, and he just posted them up. Like, I was nervous coming into this series as to how Siakam would perform because the Celtics have a lot of good, versatile defenders. But if he's able to still post up Tatum and Brown, then he's going to be fine. I thought that the bench played well. Like, I think it's pretty apparent that the Pacers are going to have an advantage on the bench once again. I thought McConnell played well. Obi Toppin looked good. Ben Shepherd was +5 off the bench. Like, the bench was impactful. Okay, like, McConnell's going to continue to get into the lane and score or find open shooters. Obi Toppin was great out in transition. He wasn't great defensively. That's my concern with him, but he was impactful in transition. He had open shots. He played really well. Ben Shepherd just does all the little things. He grabs some rebounds. He played great defense. And when he's open, he's more than capable of knocking down open shots. The Pacers controlled the pace the entire way there in that game. So they look good. Like, they're going to be fine. I know losing game 1 sucks, especially when you give it away like that, but they're going to be fine going forward. I like their chances in game 2. But before we get to game 2, game 1, Mavs and Timberwolves is tonight. I like the Mavs in 6. Timberwolves just aren't built to beat Dallas. I think Dallas poses a lot of issues for the Timberwolves just with their rim protection. That's what the Timberwolves want to do. They want to slash and get to the rim. Having guys like Gafford and Lively kind of on that back line for the Mavs, I think is going to be really influential in this series. Those guys have been great. On top of that, when you don't know who to pick, you take the team that has the best player in the series. And the Dallas Mavericks don't only have the best player in the series, they have the best player left in the playoffs in the form of Luka Doncic. You know, the Timberwolves, they defend on the ball really, really well. But they don't have anyone who can defend Luka. You know, I think Lou Dort for the Thunder is kind of the perfect guy to put on Luka. Like, you want stoutness more than you want length. And when you look at the defenders for the Timberwolves, they're very long. They aren't very stout. Like, Jaden McDaniels is too skinny to defend Luka. Anthony Edwards is too small. He's 6'4". Luka's, 6'7", 6'8". He's too small to defend Luka. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, he's like 6'9", 100 pounds soaking wet. He's just too small to defend that guy. So I think Luka's going to have a really big series for Dallas just because the Timberwolves don't have anyone that can really defend him. Right, so that game's happening tonight at 8:30. And then the Fever play tonight at 10 o'clock. Caitlin Clark continues her season. I may watch a little bit of it. The game's at 10. That's just annoying. They are not playing one of the 3 best teams in the league. Finally, they're playing the Seattle Storm, who are currently 1-3 on the season. So I'm excited. I'm interested to see how Caitlin Clark and the rest of this Fever team perform, not having to play against a team that has an MVP candidate, not having to play against a team that's potentially good enough to win the entire thing. Okay. I can't wait, to watch how she looks throughout the game tonight. I think she's going to play really well. She's slowly starting to figure things out, right? Like the turnovers are still too high, but she's starting to knock down jump shots. And that's kind of the thing that she does. She's not very good defensively, but I'm not overly worried about that. There are a lot of rookies in both the NBA and in the WNBA that aren't very good defensively, right? That's just kind of the way that it works. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to watching how she looks tonight. I'm excited to watch Dallas and Minnesota. Like the Boston and Indy series is going to be really good. Like I think that series is going to go 6 or 7. Minnesota, Dallas is going to be just as good, but potentially better. I think it's going to be better, honestly. So we'll see how it goes. I can't wait to watch that series tonight. Can't wait to watch Game 2 tomorrow night. That's what tomorrow's show is going to be about. A lot of previewing Game 2, what I expect from the Pacers tomorrow, what I expect from the Celtics, all that fun stuff coming up. Here in about 5 minutes, we've got the Dan Dockett Show. He's got plenty of thoughts on the Pacers' brutal loss last night. I'm excited to hear his thoughts on Carlisle. Should he have called a timeout? What would he have done differently? We always appreciate the coaching perspective that the great Dan Dockett Show provides. I'll be back tomorrow from 11 to noon here on both the stream on X and YouTube and live on the Indy Sports Ticket app. The Dan Dockett Show is coming at you here in about 5 minutes. I will talk to you tomorrow.